In dealing with climate change and pushing ahead with a sustainable, eco-friendly development agenda, efforts are crucial not only from developed countries, but also from developing nations as well. After all, green growth is a shared agenda for all. For an in-depth look into how developing countries, especially those in Africa, are joining global efforts to achieve sustainable development and how they're making use of various renewable energy sources, Arirang News sat down with Ms. Alice Akinyi Kaudia, Kenya's first former Environment Secretary. Thank you, Ms. Kaudia. Welcome to our program.
Thank you very much.
So based on your experience as a former Environment Secretary in Kenya, now at Eco Entrepreneurs, you're providing some expert guidance on global green growth. So tell us more about your role.
My role in advising the Global Green Growth Knowledge Partnership process includes high-level advice in terms of strategic direction that should be taken so that we are able to promote green growth globally. I also support the use of the knowledge products that comes from the Global Green Growth Partnership in many ways. One of the ways is to use that information and to inform policies within the African continent so that many of our countries can take up green growth as one of the development strategies to avoid negative impacts of climate change.
So speaking of which, developing countries are vulnerable to climate change, but at the same time, because as they achieve rapid economic growth, they cannot avoid the responsibility for climate change. So, and this is why developing countries have to work on green growth and sustainable development. What is your take on this?
Definitely, climate change is a global threat and it doesn't know geographical boundaries. So whether you're in the northern hemisphere or lower, developing or developed countries, we are all in the same boat. We either float or we sink together. For that reason, even developing countries have got a huge responsibility to ensure that they support development pathways that are climate friendly, that is low carbon development and sustainable development systems. And they have to take action depending on their national capabilities. It requires that they undertake analysis at the national level and identify sectors that will have the least cost but highest impact when action is taken. In Kenya, for example, we have identified the transport sector. We have also identified renewable energy, use sectors. We have identified agriculture sector, forestry sector, housing, building and infrastructure are some of the areas where if we avoid excessive use of resources and emission of gases, greenhouse gases, we can have a better development pathway and also help our communities to adapt to climate change. Yeah.
In the process of adapting and adjusting the systems to deal with climate change, you must be well aware of the reality and barriers that developing countries face in terms of achieving a development that's sustainable and green. So what is the most urgent task for developing countries in building a sustainable energy system, and what can they do?
I think what they need to do is to work together in terms of regional capabilities, because investment in power infrastructure and for distribution and enabling access by communities is very expensive. And therefore, when countries work together, they can be able to pool resources, financial resources and technical resources. We also need to enable access to technology that supports sustainable lifestyles, resource efficiency in the agriculture sector, transport sectors, and so on. And therefore, having strategic partners with financial capability to support a response to climate change through green growth is very strategic for developing countries.
And in fact, South Korea is also joining in the global efforts. And what I want to ask you is, well, South Korea will be hosting a P4G Summit next year. And of course, the P4G Summit has a great meaning in terms of achieving a green growth. So what is the value of P4G for developing countries?
I'm sure many of us will be asking, what is P4G? But I mean, I think it stands for Partnership for Global Green Growth. And what I find very strategic about P4G is that it creates like a matching marketplace whereby you find that organizations or companies with innovations and technologies are able to support green business ideas by those from not just developing countries, but from any part of the world. If the business idea can enable us transition to a better economy, more environmental and climate-friendly economy, then it can be supported through P4G. So I think it will be a big opportunity for South Korea to host P4G Summit. And remember, being a summit, it means we're having high-level political participation. And that has got a lot of implications in terms of how P4G opportunities are then internalized at the country level or regional level globally.
And in addition to hosting the P4G Summit next year, South Korea has established the Global Green Growth Institute, which is an international organization that supports developing countries in achieving sustainable and green development and help them deal with climate change. So what do you think South Korea was able to show by this initiative? What do you think South Korea's role is in this arena?
The role of South Korea in Global Green Growth Institute is demonstrating an example on how political leadership and high-level leadership can craft an idea that can help the whole world. Because through the Global Green Growth Institute, there is that partnership that is created by for member countries to access financial resources, to access technology, to access knowledge products that enables them take action at their respective country level. So I think South Korea really led the way in enabling the world to agree and accept that indeed taking up green growth innovations and technologies is the right policy direction.
Well, there's a lot of global attention on using eco-friendly energy to deal with climate change, and I believe that this is also spreading in Africa. So what would you say is the most noteworthy development in Africa, or especially in Kenya, regarding renewable energy?
Renewable energy has been shown scientifically and practically to be the least cost approach to providing clean, quality energy to the world. And I think in Africa, there's a lot of effort for countries to transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy. Energy sources like wind, solar, geothermal, biogas, natural gas, and so on. And for Africa, we are blessed with a lot of sunshine. And therefore, having solar energy power plants is relatively easy. Similarly, we have got huge geothermal resources, and many African countries have got even a better vision of focusing on 2030 as the end time. For the African Union, we are talking about our Agenda 2063, and we would presume and anticipate that by that time, every household in Africa should actually be using electricity for cooking.
Wow.
And we should be having lighting from electricity, because that is the only way we can also contribute to social development, for example, by improving the health of our people. There's a lot of indoor air pollution arising from use of biomass energy for cooking. And that affects women, affects children, and their health is therefore, badly affected. And this is something we can avoid and improve the quality of life for people in Africa. Yeah.
Speaking of energy transformation in Africa, are there any leading countries in Africa that are achieving energy transformation? And among various sources of energy, like for example, hydrogen, solar, whatnot, what are some of the mostly used energy sources?
Let me take the example of Kenya, because that's where I come from and I'm more familiar with the country. We have a huge aspiration to ensure that, by 2020, most of our energy is from the renewable source. And I think that is rather a near-term goal now, given the time that has lapsed, because, development, aspiration and actualization are two different things, and therefore we can aspire and fail to actualize. But there is that move, and we find that there's a lot of huge investment on the geothermal resources. There's also a lot of huge investment on off-grid energy solutions, generating electricity from mini hydros, from wind farms, from solar systems, and also introducing energy efficient and economic technologies for use. So energy efficiency is a very important lens that governments in Africa are using to ensure that whatever is available is used efficiently. And therefore you find that conducting energy audits at the industry level is a common practice. Very favorable policy and regulatory frameworks in terms of laws and strategies have been developed in Africa. And I see, I have optimism about Africa, and I can say we are moving in the right direction. Definitely there are challenges, and we'll find that there may be a difference in terms of how the urban populations and the rural populations gain from the whole energy mix. There is also a difference between how women benefit and how men benefit, but there's an overall very, very positive progress.
The renewable energy market is also seen to have a lot of economic potential because it creates jobs as well. And we know that Africa will soon become a continent with the second largest population following Asia. And we know that its economic growth pace is very fast. So do you believe that a transformation to renewable energy system will help create jobs in Africa as well? How do you think it will contribute?
Yes, I believe renewable energy systems and transition to renewable energy will help create many jobs. I mean, you have mentioned the huge population growth. I mean, you need the consumers, you need the market. So when we are growing population-wise, we should also be creating that capacity to consume the products. And I see opportunity when we take renewable energy as a value chain, right from technology generation, designs, development, uptake. We will need people who are knowledgeable and skilled to promote the renewable energy innovations and technologies. There'll be even artisanal cottage industry opportunities in terms of repairs of damaged systems, and the management of the waste which will be generated from the consumption of renewable energy products. I mean, I am seeing a whole opportunity from engineering to social thinkers to social development, economic development. There are lots of opportunities that are there.
Wow, wow. Yeah. Last but not least, what efforts do you think African countries will have to make to follow through the Paris Agreement on climate change? Or are there any things that are currently in progress?
Yes, many African countries are really committed to delivering on the Paris Agreement, and most of them have got their national determined contribution documents ready, and those documents actually are founded on sound analysis of national circumstances, national policy environments, and enabling drivers of change and action on Paris Agreement commitments. And therefore, in my assessment, there's very good progress that has been made. I take an example of a country like Kenya, where we have a Climate Change Act in place in 2016, just after Paris Agreement. There's a framework policy on climate change. There are strategies and institutional arrangements have been set for countries to move and take action. The only worry that I would have is the pace of action. It needs to be fast and at a very large scale. Otherwise, we still risk not meeting the targets.
All right. Well, thank you for your insights, Ms. Kaudia. It was great having you on our program.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Kenya.
Thank you.